Hi, I'm Rachael Sparks, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Rory, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Rachael Sparks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories Podcast for yet another author interview and bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. We've got a fantastic interview for you today, but before we get into it, I'd like to tell you about some sponsors. Mindy Tarquini. Mindy has been a guest on the show a couple of times, and there's some links down in the show notes to her past episodes. I'd like to tell you about her book, The Infinite Now. She was on the show last year to talk about it. This book is mind-blowing and amazing. It was a 2017 Today Show Winter Book Selection 2017 winner of the USA Best Book Awards. In flu-ravaged Philadelphia, a young immigrant struggles to learn the intricacies of time-bending, teamwork, and living in a world which seems as hell-bent on breaking her spirit as she is to keep it. This is not your mother's historical fiction. Kirkus calls The Infinite Now a well-woven tapestry of history, character, and charming mystery. BuzzFeed called it a masterpiece. The Historical Novel Society says Tarquini uses words like a composer. School Library Journal said The Infinite Now is historical fiction portrayed in a new way and declared it a title not to be missed. Do not miss this book. There's a link to it in the show notes at hankgarner.com. I'd also like to thank editor Ellen Campbell for sponsoring the show. Ellen has been a faithful sponsor of the show for quite some time, and she's an editor that I have used. She's someone that I trust. When you're writing a story, you need someone that can have that critical eye that helps your words be better, yet still retain what you meant. That's what a great editor does. She helps you to tell your story the best way possible. Ellen can do that for you. Find her at ellencampbelledits.com. ellencampbelledits.com. Thank you, Ellen, for sponsoring the show. I'd also like to thank Ernest Dempsey for sponsoring the show. Ernest writes a series of books, among others, called the Shaun Wyatt Adventure Series. I got to be friends with Ernest because I had him on the show last year because I discovered his books as a reader. And these are some of the best mystery, conspiracy theory books that I had found in quite a while. His newest book is called The Templar Curse. It's been out since the spring, and there's a brand new one coming soon. There are 15 books in this series, and this is one of my all-time favorite series. And Ernest is a really nice guy as well. He's one of those writers that you love his work, and you love him too. Check out the series in the show notes. The Shaun Wyatt Adventure Book Series by Ernest Dempsey. Stay tuned after our great author interview for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. And also remember that Richard just released Book 4 in the Jason Crane series, this massive, massive series that is continuing on. The brand new book, Book 4, is out. And also look for Richard to join me for our annual Halloween show. Now on to our great author interview. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Rachael Sparks on the show with me today. Rachael has a fantastic new book called Resistant that is out everywhere now where you buy books. And you guys, this book is a really unique blend of thriller, science fiction, romance. Everything is in this book. And what an incredible feat. Welcome to the show, Rachael.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. But before we can get in and talk about all the good stuff we have to talk about, we begin each show with the same question. And that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I knew you were going to ask this, and I thought long and hard about it. I'd love to say that as a kid, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. I certainly loved creative writing, and I remember wanting to be as good of a storyteller as my father, who always seemed to have the best pacing and timing, and he would even use his body when he told stories, but I don't think I knew that I wanted to do this until the last couple of years. I always wanted to have a job where my daily challenge was to make science as fascinating and as personal and as just enrapturous to a reading audience as it is for me, and to do it with the tools of poetry and the tools of language and narrative structure and pacing and timing. And I think it just took a real heaping of maturity to realize that I had the ability to do it without really needing anyone else's approval.
Well, it goes to that essential storytelling nature that is built in you, that you could take the things that you're passionate about and want to communicate those to other people, and then writing fiction and publishing and all that sometimes is secondary. But it sounds like that you knew from an early time that communicating and bringing things out in an engaging way to other people was a skill that you had.
Yeah, I just always loved words. I think they used to call me in my family Miss Dictionary. So I just a natural little geek with her encyclopedias and always a book, and the kid on vacation who never really saw anything because she had her nose in a book. So I just I think I always had it as a skill set and just didn't realize I could use it for an entire novel. And then once I started, I couldn't stop.
What types of things did you love to read when you were younger?
I think, as a young girl, I was just into so many different topics. The Babysitter's Club, I remember, were probably my first, full-length books that I had just ate up. But as I grew up, I started to lead myself down paths that school wasn't taking me. So I remember I once actually got a very bad grade in my English course because I was reading Wuthering Heights instead of The Good Earth. I'm still appalled that people are still doing that damage to children with The Good Earth. But we had a talk with the teacher, and she understood why once she learned I was reading Wuthering Heights on my own.
That's amazing. What is it about science that fascinated you, or that still fascinates you?
Well, I think that it's always made more sense to me than a lot of religion and a lot of fables. And so as a way to explain the world, it just always made the most sense to me. And I was kind of an autodidact, and was teaching myself a lot of things even before college. But I had the pleasure of getting to study microbiology in college, and just loved that world of science at its smaller bits. I'm not bright enough to be a physicist, but I love how the world is driven by all these tiny microbes, and there's so many more of them than there are of us, and it's endlessly fascinating to me for that particular area of science. And then as I studied in college, I got to go into other fields of science and learn more about genetics and things like that. And it's just always made the world make a lot more sense to me.
Well, when you're talking about the world of microorganisms and microbes and that sort of thing, that is becoming more mainstream thinking, if you will. You even hear people in the health realm start talking about the gut microbiome and all of the the creatures that live inside us and how they even control the way that we crave food and all of this sort of thing. And it's really mind blowing when you start kind of picking apart all of the things going on in our world that we can't see nor begin to wrap our brains around.
Oh, I know. It's just endlessly fascinating what we're learning about how much the microbiome impacts how our bodies function, and we're probably a key to the evolution of our bodies. There's more cells, bacterial cells in your body than there are your own human cells. That alone, it boggles the mind what we don't know yet. And I'm so glad that so many researchers are dedicating their work to helping us figure it all out, because I really think in the long run, we're going to know so much more about human health because we spent time looking at bacteria less as our enemy and more as sort of just a native part of ourselves.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you really became interested in writing fiction just a few years ago. What did you decide what career path did you decide to take before that?
Well, so after studying microbiology, I actually went into the world of transplants, and not specifically organs, but tissue transplants like bone grafts and corneas and skin grafts. And for a decade, I worked in that world and became a specialist in it, mostly helping families. I was actually screening patients and then speaking to their loved ones who had just lost someone in the last few hours and helping them to understand whether or not they would like to have their loved one be a donor. That was a decade of my life that was very challenging and incredibly rewarding because those wonderful people were just such amazing folks who were willing to give at a moment when so much had been taken from them. And all of them live in my memory, and I remember their stories about their loved ones and their stories about themselves so fondly and warmly. But it is a really hard world, and it's 24/7, 365. And so after that, I went into the startup world and infection prevention, and I work still for this wonderful company called Zenex, and we make a germ zapping robot. It disinfects hospital rooms so that you can have a higher chance of not getting an infection when you're at a hospital.
That's
and that
amazing.
world, yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, they're just achieving great things and are in like 450 hospitals. And when I started, it was just 4 of us in a tiny office. But you know what was most amazing about that experience, I think, is how much I've just learned about what I was capable of that I didn't realize or didn't have confidence in myself about. And so working with that company and seeing what I grew into, I kind of grew into being the marketing person. And so the marketing team said, please come over. You've been writing the manuals. You've been writing everything. You've been writing our blogs. You've been writing our copy. So as we're making a real marketing team, we want you on it. And so in 2014, I became a marketer. And that really reignited my love of writing. I had always written a lot as a kid and as a teenager. But after becoming, a career girl, I just didn't have the time to dabble in it. And it gave me a great excuse to just write all the time. And so I have been just writing more and more over the last few years. And then one night, my husband and I were having a few drinks and daring each other to do something big and admit what you really wanted to be when you grew up. And I took a bet with him that I would write the first 3 chapters of a novel if he would build the first piece of furniture that he wanted to build.
Oh, wow.
And so that was, we had 3 months to win the bet, as I recall. And 9 months later, I'd finished Resistant.
Nice. Those are the best conversations when you get down to core value stuff, and then and someone there with you will take the leap with you. Those are amazing times.
Yeah, I have a fantastic husband, and he's very supportive of this new chapter in my life. But he didn't make any furniture, so he lost that one.
So do we need to call him out now and heap shame?
He's built quite a few amazing other things. So
okay,
yeah.
we'll let it slide then. We'll let it slide. Well, it sounds to me, Rachael, that you have lived and worked in a world where science and science fiction kind of meet head on with transplants and that whole technology and field of study. And there's cutting edge stuff going there, and then to making robots that fight germs and disease. That's incredible stuff. When the idea for Resistant came to you, when you said, okay, I'm going to take this bet, I'm going to write the first 3 chapters of a novel, then 9 months later you'd finish the book. Did you know from the beginning what the story would be? Sometimes you just make a daring thing and you just say, I don't know what I'm going to write, but I know that I want to know. Or was the idea already hatching in your mind?
It had hatched a little bit. I'd had a dream where there was a little snippet of like a movie scene basically that involved the end of the book. But no, I had otherwise no idea. So I did try a little bit of plotting, but it's just not my style. I'm definitely the seat of the pants type of writer, and so I just started writing, and it just poured out. And there certainly were some revisions and some chapters that got thrown out, but for the most part, it just sort of tumbled out. And I had so much to rely on all these stories from my own career, where I'd seen what infection can do to people. I can imagine the world without antibiotics. So that was so informative for me. And I have so many more stories like that I can't wait to tap into, that, thought experiences you didn't even remember that you had until you start to explore them again.
Okay, I'm fascinated when a new idea comes, because I'm endlessly fascinated by where stories come from, and every writer hates to be asked that question. Well, where did the idea for this one come from? Because
sure.
Ideas are everywhere. And most of the time, if you're looking for a story idea, all you need to do is read the headlines or overhear a conversation in a coffee shop, or ideas are everywhere. Now,
right.
a great idea is something that's a little ethereal. Sometimes they just seem to come out of nowhere. And especially if you're a science-minded person, it really seems like magic, because you just can't explain where things come from sometimes. What comes to you first? Is it a character? Is it a plot point? Is it maybe a setting, or where a scene takes place? What comes to you first?
I think I usually think first of a plot point, sort of a conflict, and maybe a kind of a point in the novel that would be a turning point, that would be an issue to resolve, and how would a character overcome that hurdle. So I think that's where I usually start. When I look at all the sticky notes that are strewed about my office right in front of me, they're full of notes like that, and thank God for Google Keep, because I can just grab my phone and dictate a little idea and try to remember it and find it later. But yeah, I think that my ideas are less probably character centered, and more I find them in a problem that will need to be solved by a character. Gotcha.
So when Resistant started forming and you started writing it down, how quickly did Rory come into the story?
Really immediately. I knew that Rory and Navy, her counterpart in the novel, I knew that they were going to be the key two main characters, and she was a lot more transparent to me about the way I wanted her to be and who I wanted her to become through the process of the novel. He was a little bit more of a mystery to me, and was fun to dig into, but she was right there. She was really clear for me.
Gotcha. So let's talk about Resistant. You mentioned earlier these little things that started informing, like what would a world be like without antibiotics, and so kind of give us the setup for the book. What is going on in this world? How does Rory and Navy, how do they come into the picture? And just give us the kind of where this book takes us.
Sure. Well, so Resistant is set in a little bit in the future, and the world that it's set in is really not meant to be something fantastical or strange. It's just our world, a little bit further ahead, if we don't stop what's going on with antibiotics. We're losing antibiotics left and right, and we haven't developed any new ones in like 30 years. So at some point, we're going to be in the situation of being, I think, frankly, kind of in a Civil War medicine scenario, where we don't have the tools that we used to have to fight infections. And I wanted to imagine that world where, what would it be like if we really didn't have them anymore? What kind of things would happen? How many people would we lose? What would we have to do to adapt to live in that world? And then how would we survive it? And so Resistant is basically that entire world brought to life. Rory is a young woman whose parents were both researchers. Her mother died from an infection, and her father has taken them out to live on a farm so that they can get by since they kind of have to live by their wits now and by their own hard work. And so they kind of live out on a farm in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And she's just living life and trying to educate herself through her father's own knowledge. He's a PhD and her mother was as well. So she's sort of autodidacting her way to a degree because she can't even go to college. And then Navy enters their life, and he is sort of a drifter and seems like someone who has a lot of secrets. And as it turns out, he knows more about her secrets than she knows.
Interesting. So you mentioned that the idea of living in a world without antibiotics and that we're losing antibiotics left and right. What is going on there? Why are we, if someone doesn't understand what you're talking about, why is this happening?
Sure.
And what is causing it?
Well, so at a very simple scientific microbiological level, and I'm sure most people hear that word and think, well, that's not going to be simple. So I'll try to keep it simple.
Okay.
Bacteria exist to live and divide and make more of themselves. That's just their simple, they're single-celled organisms. That's what they're meant to do. If they encounter something that's going to harm them or kill them, a few of them may die off, and then a few of them may just, through natural mutation in time, develop a way around it, whether it's alcohol wipes, whether it's bleach, or whether it's a tool like antibiotics. And so as soon as we introduce antibiotics into the world, bacteria were developing resistance to them. But the more that we expose bacteria to antibiotics, the faster that they develop resistance. And so, you start off in the 1800s when you first found penicillin, and fast forward through the ages to now, and you've got, a lot of antibiotics, but just as many bacteria that have gone from being, staph, which just used to live on our skin and not really cause us many troubles, to MRSA. It's methicillin resistant. It's showing resistant to other bacteria. We've just been pounding these bacteria with so many antibiotics that they are all developing tools to get around it. And what's creepy about them, even though I do love bacteria, is that they can actually share that knowledge of how to work around antibiotics between themselves, whether they are completely different species. So that's like if, my dog taught me how to speak dog, if I taught a cat how to speak English, it's amazing that they can cross over and give each other these tools to overcome what we've developed to fight them. And it's our fault. We've just been abusing antibiotics left and right. We give it to ourselves too much. We give it to our agricultural system too much. In the last year, it's been reported that pigs actually receive as much antibiotics as we're using in human healthcare. And it's not because they're so sick, it's just because they knew that it was a great way to help them gain weight and make the whole industry, more profit. And that's totally understandable. I'm not saying that was some sort of evil plot. It was just, we've got to undo it. And so we've got to look at antibiotics as something that are used sparingly, rarely. And then you kind of get to the other end of that story, which is that with the antibiotics not being found, no new ones being found for a long time, why aren't we researching to find more of them? And the truth is that it's really not very profitable for pharmaceutical companies to look for it, because they know it's not like we're going to use a lot of it when they do discover it, right? So if they produce a pill that everybody wants, like Viagra, it's going to make them a lot of money, and they'll keep making it, and they'll research other new ones. But if I promise to make a product that people are by definition going to buy less of, to be cautious, it's not a lot of incentive to do that research. So we're having to think of it in brand new ways and find new ways to both prevent infections and to treat them.
So it sounds to me, a layperson, that the bacteria world is going through its own form of evolution in the same way that we are, but on a different scale and with this weird intelligence.
Yeah, and what's simple, or what makes bacteria so simple is also the key to why they're able to evolve so quickly. They're just constantly reproducing. So what takes us thousands upon thousands of years to evolve a major change in our species takes them a week. I mean, it's just the definition of how small they are and how quickly they can reproduce. So
yeah, which is the definition of a plot for a science fiction novel.
I know, right? I mean, we barely scratched the surface of how many cool stories you could write about this.
Oh, I know. So, so the other part of this story, that you've, described to us in Resistant is that, there might be a cure, or there might be, at least part of a solution, to what's going on. And how do your characters factor into this?
Right. So without giving up, too much plot, basically Rory, seems to have an ability to be resistant to resistant infections, right? So all her life, she's never had an infection. And when she has exposure to them, nothing ever happens. So it seems to be that her body knows something that she doesn't, and that no one else seems to have. And so she becomes the target of a government that wants to find that cure and then to sell the cure really to whoever can afford it rather than giving it to everyone. And on the other side of that is a team of people who are trying to find that cure and give it to everyone, and they're called the Resistance. And so she's torn between these two powers and is racing to escape the government with the help of Navy.
So what we have is a science fiction novel set in the near future with a conspiracy thriller undertone and a great character study with these main protagonists. As you're writing this, what did you see this book as, or did you even think in terms of genre, and did you think in terms of selling the book and all that, or is this just a story that you just had to get out?
I would say it's really a story I had to get out. I did worry that when I was writing it, it was not going to fit nicely into the boxes that exist out there. And I certainly learned that when I got into publishing, because I consider it to have a love story that was really moving to me, and I liked that part a lot. It was about family, about Rory and her relationship with her father. It was about science fiction, right? That's obviously the undercurrent of all of it. And it was also, a little bit of a mystery. And so I wanted it to be kind of an adventure novel too. Those are always my favorite when there's sort of, a long voyage and many challenges. But it definitely, I knew wouldn't really fit. But one of the things I was also writing for is the girls out there like me who wanted a heroine who, and I hope this is okay on your podcast, but can
absolutely. Yeah.
I wanted a heroine who could solve a lot of her own problems, who could make some mistakes and have to get herself out of them herself. A heroine who was bright, young enough to still be learning a lot, and old enough to be responsible for her own screw ups. And so I wanted, I wanted a character that I hadn't read a lot of out there. So I knew when I was writing her that because I felt like she didn't exist for me in other novels, and I'm sure I just haven't found, some authors that are doing this wonderful writing, and I don't mean to imply that I'm the only one, but I wanted a badass heroine that wasn't necessarily imbued with a magical skill set or, good at swords or something. I just wanted her to be badass in her own way and her own intelligence.
Awesome. Man, there's so much in this book, and I'm with you that I really am frustrated by sometimes the way we sell books and the way we market books, because sometimes things just don't fit neatly into the boxes, like you said. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand that you need to be able to categorize things so that people can find the things that they like. I get that. But man, so, life is not, singular in its genre matchups. You know, every day, my wife and I will have a tender conversation, or we'll go on a date, or, I'm working with some technology that my grandparents couldn't imagine existed. And, so there's a science fiction aspect to my life. And then we're raising 5 kids. So there's adventure everywhere. Life is all over the place. And I hate that our storytelling tends to have to line up with one thing or another sometimes. And it's just, it's frustrating, but I feel where you're coming from. So how did you get the book out when it was finished and you start kind of understanding things about publishing and all that? What path did you take to get your book out?
Well, when I was done, I still had to be convinced that I should publish it in any way, shape, or form. And my husband and my first readers were really kind and really supportive and said I should. So I did, what was available to me very simply. So I tried Amazon and just, Kindle published it myself. I designed a cover. When I look back on it, it's a pretty ugly, it's ugly as sin. But I was quite proud of it at the time. But I had started to. In the year of 2016, I joined Twitter. I'd always had a user handle, never used it, but the new election led me down that path, and it was great forum for a young author to see what other authors talk about and do and what they're going through, and I still love that about the Twitter community. But the the path that I saw were these young, brilliant authors sharing little snippets here and there who were saying, I'm pitching my 300th query letter, or I went through 100 agents and didn't find anybody. And so I started down that path. I tried it out. And then I reached out to a wonderful pair of women here in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. They're called Goldleaf Literary, and I thought were agents. And in fact, they were literary publicity agents, but they were super helpful. And they said, you should really look at She Writes Press, and suggested that I reach out to them and go through their querying system. So I did, and it's this wonderful hybrid publisher that's really kind of breaking down the barriers of traditional publishing and saying, you can greenlight yourself, you can you still have to jump through some hoops to show that you've got writing skills, so that you've got a plot, that you've got a book that people will actually want to purchase. But you can invest in yourself in this way, and you can do it with the full Ingram Publishing Services sales force. And so I was really honored to be accepted into their cohort for 2018, and they helped with editing, they designed the book cover. They're just such a great team of people, Brooke Warner and her whole team. And then Spark Press is actually the imprint that they decided to put me under because of it being more of a sci-fi adventure tale. But that's the path that I've gone down, and I absolutely love it. I can't recommend it highly enough. I know that a lot of people will always want to do a traditional publishing route, and I certainly hope that one day I would have the opportunity to, if I were successful enough. But yeah, that's the path that I took, and I'm really pleased with it.
Well, it's a great time for publishing right now. We talk about this a lot because I don't know what that was. Because authors have choices. For maybe one of the first times, especially choices on this scale, where there's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, like you talked about, where you do everything, and then there are these great hybrid companies that come along and help you to navigate the waters. And She Writes and all the folks at Spark are doing some great things right now. And so I'm happy that you got the book out. And so the book is, when people are listening to this, Resistant is out for sale everywhere. We're going to have links to it in the show notes. You've planned a couple of follow-ups to this book, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been working on on a sequel, tentatively titled Emergent, and tell a little bit more of Rory's tale and Davies. And but I, in the meantime, also had one of those lightning strikes of just, I can't not write this other thing that's in my head. So I actually have a newly completed manuscript that I'm kind of getting some beta reader feedback on that I'm really excited about as well. So we'll have to see where that'll land. But it's longer and it's less science heavy, but still has a little bit of science fiction in it. And I've been really enjoying it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, it's a crazy thing. Once that first book is out, it's a bit of an addiction. Then the stories just won't leave you alone. You're just like, okay, well, I finished this monumental life task, and then it starts all over again. And it's so I can't wait to see what else you come up with.
Well, thank you. There's nothing I think more addictive than that moment where you're writing something and you give yourself chills, and that's. Yeah, that's all I want.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to send everybody to pick up a copy of Resistant. It's available now everywhere. Everybody, there's a link to it in the show notes at hankgarner.com. Rachel, if people are just discovering you and your work, where can they find you online to maybe connect with you and follow along with what's coming up next?
Absolutely. I have rachelsparks.com, my website. I tend to be on Twitter a lot, and you can link to it from there. And, I do my responsible best to stay live on Facebook and other places, but more
it can be murky waters out there some days.
Yeah. But yeah, rachelsparks.com, and my name is RachaelSparks.com.
Excellent. Rachel, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. And we wish you much success on the book.
Thank you so much, Hank. It was really an honor to be on and really enjoyable.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
They made instant coffee and laid blankets over a pile of hay. He helped Kate pull off her boots. She volunteered for first watch, but Jason couldn't sleep. "Talk to me?" he whispered. Kate sipped her coffee. She sat silhouetted against the soft navy sky. A field of stars hung above her. The constellations peered in through the windows and slats. "How about a story?" "Sure. My mom used to tell this one. It's the legend of the Star Maidens." He watched her words as she spoke, her story illustrated by puffs of vapor that mixed with the steam of her coffee. Long ago, a Mohican brave became lost in this valley. He'd followed a red deer deep into the woods, but the deer had vanished, and as twilight fell, he lost his way. He searched the heavens. He saw a bright star and followed it. It shone upon a clearing in the woods. Spook Rock lay at the center, emanating magic. And in the starlight, he discovered the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He discovered a star maiden. She was dancing with her sisters, and all 7 were naked. "Oh, really?" Jason whispered. 7 naked star maidens? Shh. Why do these things never happen to me? The brave decided he must take the Star Maiden for his wife, so he seized her and threw her over his shoulder, and she loved him for his courage. They married and had a son. Then what? Then it gets sad. The Star Maiden missed her home. She gazed at the sky every night. She loved her husband and her baby very much, but she missed her sisters, and she especially missed the dancing. So she snuck away one night and returned to the sacred rock. And she begged her sisters, please appear to me for one last dance. They came to her and took her into the sky. Kate's silhouette swayed. One last dance. It was wonderful. And when the dance was finished, they sent her back to Earth. She thought that she'd been away for only a little while. But that one dance had taken many, many years. She ran back to her husband, back to her baby, but they were gone. Her home was empty. The hunter had stopped waiting for her. He'd given up hope that she would return. He'd taken their child and had left with his tribe. One last dance had cost her everything, and she had no home at all. Jason could sense something roiling inside Kate, some brew of feelings that the story had stirred. He wanted to leap up, to grab her and carry her off, his star maiden and wife. She climbed up to Spook Rock. She heard no music, only wind. She died there of her grief. She dwindled and lost her star form. She became a will-o'-the-wisp, fluttering between the trees. And see that constellation? The Pleiades. Those are her 7 sisters, watching down from heaven. And, to this day, if a girl has lost her true love, she can go to Spook Rock and dance, and the star maidens will bless her. They'll grant her one wish, any wish at all, except one. They can't make her true love return.